Alex, my friend. How are you?
Good, you? How have you been?
Ah, good. Busy, busy. Listen, since this is a new platform, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us your background, and then how you ended up in 2015 shifting gears. I think that'd be a great story.
Okay. So basically, I have a engineering background, electrical and control engineering. Um, and I've always had a fascination about agriculture, but particularly at the beginning with hydroponics and the application of technology um, towards agriculture. And I always thought the solution was, high tech, high production, controlled environment agriculture was the thing I was always very interested in. Even in as I was doing, because I worked for petrochemicals before. I did a few projects in the oil and gas and petrochemical space, and I learned about the petrochemical fertilizers, the way they're made. I actually worked in a petrochemical producing plant in Moron, in Venezuela. Um, and I was always very pro tech, pro science, or pro that science at least. So in 2015, I started researching. Well, before 2015, I was researching about well, it was the whole climate change thing. I was trying to understand what was going on, if it was real or not, and what are the consequences, what have you. But even putting that aside, I had already started learning about the agricultural model that they sold us was not you know um, in the benefit of either us or the environment. It was more geared towards the producers of the technology, in this case like Monsanto and the John Deere's. And I started understanding that the whole model, not only of agriculture but of society in general, was kind of like upside down. And so I decided I wanted to take all the knowledge that I had in high tech. I had done a few startups in the high tech area, and I wanted to apply it to find solutions for food production that were more um, aligned with less impact to agriculture and less dependency on GMOs and stuff like that, and pesticides. And so I started getting interested in this area. And I guess the inspiration was, I had my daughter was pretty small at that time. We were playing in a park, and I kind of, you know, latched onto this idea that the world that we're leaving these children is really bad in many cases, right? And so I wanted to do something about it, and decided to take my experience in technology and see how I can apply it to food production. And researching, I found that rice was a very critical crop, and I started finding ways of making rice in CEA, which is something that is very hard to do. Rice is one of those plants that does not like controlled environments, and only likes one very specific environments, and that's why it's only grown in certain regions. So rice is one of those plants that are critical because it feeds 40% of the human population, whereas corn and other crops feed animals. Rice is the one crop that feeds almost half of the world. And if China overnight can produce rice, there's going to be wars, no doubt. So I got very interested in rice for some reason, and through rice, I started meeting people in the cannabis sector, and don't ask me why, but um, because I guess controlling CEA was highly developed in cannabis, especially in places like Canada because it was illegal. So these growers had to find ways of getting high yields in small spaces. Basic economics of recreational cannabis, right? So I learned a lot from these growers here in the cannabis area. And one of the things I noticed that I started learning more and more about it. um, about soil, live soil, and the benefits against what I thought was the solution, which was high tech, hydroponics. And in the one place that you can see the difference is in cannabis. Although there's many other crops we'll probably uh, relate this to, but um, the the final product of an organic grow is completely different from a high yield hydroponic. Um, for one thing, the hydroponic smells like skunk, which means that there's some highly concentrated something that is not an even distribution of terpenes and and flavonoids and what have you. So obviously that is the same with food production. If you produce hydroponics and you only apply 4 or 5 nutrients, you're going to get those 4 or 5 things. Whereas in soil, you have over 60 or 70 things that should be in the soil for a plant to grow healthy. And this includes some rare metals, that are also important for health, um, for the thyroid and chromium and all these things that are in the soil that usually they're not going to be present in the high tech CA hydroponic grow. Even though you can do hydroponic fertilizers in hydroponics, um, you're still not going to get the benefits of a live soil, right? And learning most critical things in cannabis production for organic cannabis grown in pots was the irrigation. And nobody has a solution for it. And people would just irrigate manually because if you're doing a really careful boutique grow, you need to irrigate very specifically um, to develop, the plant in a way that will not only produce a high yield but also produce a well balanced plant. Um, just like a tomato, when you're growing a tomato, if you don't stress it, the tomato is going to be all uh, fluffy and squishy. It won't be like a right the tomato plant is one of those plants that you need to stress also to get the best um, the best phenotypes. Let's say that the desired phenotypes, whether it's crunchiness or the taste or the aspect of the fruit or whatever. So getting into soil, I realized that the solution, I started seeing technology in a different way. And this is, I think, how I got to meet you and a bunch of people in this space, is that I stopped thinking. So I started thinking more and more of working with nature instead of against it. And that's how I guess I met you, because of the soil physics. I started learning a lot about water potential and how the water flows through the soil. And because sensing is a huge deal, sensing is really hard. It's incredible that I invented the distributor for the water, and I thought that was the solution. But the problem is in the measuring, not in the in the watering. And I discovered that the hard way. And so I decided to found the company based on this idea. And I developed this high tech irrigation system initially for the cannabis market, but I've since come to realize that every boutique and every specialized grow, like vineyards, truffles, these very sensitive crops, all have the same problem, is that they're heavily affected by the irrigation pattern. And it's not constant irrigation. It has to be very specific. For example, in the truffles that we were talking the other day, um, is a specific summer rain pattern that affects the yield. And it has to rain in a particular way for the yield to grow. If it rains in the fall, it doesn't matter. If it rains before that, it won't affect. But if it doesn't rain in that particular period, that will affect the. And there are many plants like that. Vineyards being one, clear example. um, where you don't want to water too much, especially at the end, to concentrate, the sugars on the grape to get the highest yield in the wine and the flavors and all that. So um, I started pivoting from this technology solves everything, from nature solve everything. Technology is a tool for us to work better with nature. So I guess that also delayed my startup, because I went a completely different direction, which is understanding the dynamics of the soil and the plant and the ecosystem as a whole, right? And so I started looking at regenerative farming and permaculture and all these topics that I think the future is there. It's not it. I mean, I think CEA, controlled environment agriculture, obviously will play a role in food production for simple stuff like greens and um, and many other crops. But for the complicated ones, I think that soil is the way, and probably for even CEA with soil, it's probably better than CEA with with other substrates, because the quality of the final product is completely different um, when the plant is able to develop itself within um, its natural environment, right? With a good biology.
So
And
I think what you're talking about is genetic potential. So giving the plant the opportunity to express itself with its full control.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've definitely documented the increased nutrients, increased flavonoids, terpenes, all of that. Exactly what you're saying,
Mhm.
and I agree with you that even in the highest yield, uh, whether you want to call them the CEC controlled indoor or controlled environment agriculture, or some of these come on, the towers. The hell is it?
Mhm.
Where they're growing vertically inside cities.
Mhm.
They just can't get it. There's just no way you can duplicate what the biology can pull out of the sand, silt, clay, and organic matter. I don't
Man,
care how much mineral you throw at it. You're never going to get that
the
collect.
simple proof of that is people willing to pay 4 times for organic grown cannabis than they pay for the commercial one here in Canada. So that is, $1,000 a pound versus $4,000 a pound. And there's a reason. It's not there's a reason I buy single malt Scotch. He doesn't give me a break,
Agreed, 100%.
you
And
know.
if you
If
have the ability, of course you're going to want something that's better than just average.
if you drink Smirnoff made out of corn, versus the real thing, you can tell the difference. It might taste the same, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Not so not all you know. Um, how do you say? Ethanol is the same.
Right.
It's a very complex mix of different types of ethanols that make a good whiskey versus a bad one. They look the same, they smell the same, but they're not the same. And the body reacts completely different to one or the other. You know, again, if you bring it back to the to the cannabis, a good sativa might give you a nice high, but a hydroponic one will give you, paranoia, what have you.
Right.
It's the same THC and CBD, but that slight difference, it's a completely different experience, and that's the reason why people are willing to pay so much more for these kind of products. And you see the same thing goes for truffle, the same. So all these, I guess, for everything that we consume is the same idea. If it's produced in an environment where the plant is able to, like you said, express its full potential, full genetic potential in a balanced phenotype distribution, right? You're not exaggerating any particular feature, the plant is able to develop its full potential all across the board instead of these particular, oh yeah, I don't know, 80% THC. Yeah, but what does that mean? For, I mean, if you're a crazy pothead, then it won't matter. But if you're like a seasoned and elevated consumer, it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Mhm.
And the same thing goes for food, right? You know, a lot of people don't care about getting sick or whatever. I do. So it's and it tastes completely different, man. I mean, you take a good steak uh in the US grown, in a typical beef farm, and you take a grass fed um steak grown in somewhere in Argentina or whatever. Natural, no chemical, no nothing, right? The natural one might even not be as tasty as the as the other one, but the how you feel after you eat it is completely different, you know. So I think a lot of our health issues also are associated with you know with all the poisons that we're consuming and the bad nutrition. So it's a double problem. One is that the nutritional value is low. They're exaggerating certain phenotypes that are palatable or that are attractive for marketing or for um, for like the eye candy, and they're exaggerating certain aspects like sweetness or whatever, you know, or softness, um, or fat, but the nutritional value is really low. Um, so I guess good biology and good soil, it not only gives better yields, but it gives a better product that is healthier for everybody, even the farmers. The farmer is the one that suffers the most. They're the ones exposed to all the chemicals and today they're the ones that are getting the short end of the stick in terms of like the value chain. They're the ones earning the least in the whole value chain.
Yep.
The whole thing is upside down. So one way that I would like the company I've been trying to push forward is empower the farmer, um, by giving them control and data and a better possibility of getting rid of the non-value part of the chain, and that's their land. They don't need to depend on Monsanto and the petrochemical providers and the well, I guess the tractors to some degree. But if you have a good soil, you don't need to till it. You should just be able to plant on top. Um, in fact, tilling it would actually kill a good part of the biology.
Oh yeah.
So, but the change in mindset, man, is hard. It's hard for people to understand. It's hard for farmers to take the risk. You know.
Another big piece of the puzzle is, and you're old enough to remember this, was when the big push in the '80s came for all of this. Oh, new John Deere equipment, new this, new that, new fertilizer, new pesticides,
Mhm.
and it basically bankrupted the farmer. They had a couple bad years, due to the weather or exposure to things that were promised to be really good that weren't good. It actually, killed their crops, and they lost their farms. I mean, there were just, I don't know, like millions of family farms that were lost in the late '70s and early '80s. And I'm sure you remember Farm Aid was a big deal. I mean, they had all these bands come together in the Midwest and talk about like how do we save the family farms, and it only got worse from there, dude. Like all the people I know lease their land. There's only one person that owns that land, and those are the big corporations like
Yeah,
BlackRock and Vanguard and those guys.
it's the same agenda, man.
Yeah,
And
if they,
the new VP pick from Trump, without getting into politics, he represents the forgotten, the people that were left behind. and they probably left behind for a reason. And I have a lot of theories about this, but we're not going to go into those.
Well, not today, but we'll go into those on another occasion.
But I mean, you look at John Calhoun and the experiments he did with rats, and then you look at our big cities models and the 15-minute city and what have you, and you can see that it's kind of geared in that direction. But so they distributed. I mean, you drive along the U.S. or Canada or even Europe. You drive even 10 minutes outside of a big city, and there is no such population problem. You know, it's only very specific. There's no overpopulation. It's just crazy. They're crazy. These people are insane, but they have the power because people believe a lot of these things.
The propaganda.
Um, yeah, but anyway, I think farmers have been screwed big time by our society as a whole.
Agreed, 100%. And it goes right back to even the homeowners. I mean,
Mhm.
let's face it, whoever you are, the inflation rate of the last 3 years is just ridiculous.
Crazy.
And
It's done on
so,
purpose, man. Done to make you poor.
yeah, it's all about control. But
It's control.
yeah, I think that so that we don't steer too deep into the dark, which is very easy to do these days.
Hmm.
Let's reel it back and talk about like your first experiment with peppers. Can you enlighten everybody about what you did with that algorithm and why you did it and how it worked?
Yeah. So I wanted to replicate the. At the time I was doing this, I think cannabis was still illegal here. I think it legalized in 2016. I started in 2016, and the legalization happened somewhere in 2016 to 2017. Besides, my wife didn't want me to grow cannabis at home or whatever, so I decided pepper plants were the closest thing that behaved the closest to potted cannabis. So I set up an experiment to see if there was first of all to try to understand what the problem actually was. Um, and in the organic soil growing, um, the challenge was measuring. Well, was first uh, the dosage of the water had to be very specific, and so it was a very specific amount of water, and the drying of the soil had to be, you know, very specific as well, and it was very dry, drier than your hand could detect. Your finger doesn't know the difference between, you know, dry and very dry. You know, so the the sensing was the problem every time. Um, it took at least, I would say, like probably the first 3 years of experiments was just trying to get the sensing right. And one thing I found is that the sensor would get coated with something, and
Wow.
we later assumed there was some sort of biology around the sensor that all the capacitive sensors will fail over time because they develop this film, and
Yeah, it's biofilm.
it disconnects the sensor from the soil. Um, so measuring the water potential was the biggest challenge to do. You can get TDS sensors, which are very expensive, but you can't leave them in the soil for long term. They have the same problem. And after a lot of, I tested, I don't know how many types of sensors. Um, I bought, I probably invested in mostly every type of sensor you can think of. And the one sensor that worked, and it worked consistently over time, was that watermark sensor from Barometer. Barometer happens to be the same people that produced the
It's
the
it's a aerometer. It's
Yeah,
a
everybody calls it the arometer, but I forgot the technical name of the tool. But it's the same bulb at the end, and it senses the pressure, um, or how hard the plant needs to extract the water, which is in essence water potential, which is not the water quantity in the soil, but it's the water that the plant can actually access, and how hard it is for the plant to extract that water from the soil. That measurement um, is very very hard to accomplish in long term. So, for example, in 90 days, or or across 2 or 3 crops, to leave a sensor there for a long time is something that's very challenging. And the one and only sensor that works is a sensor from the 70s, which is made by Arometer, which is called the Watermark. The Watermark is a very simple sensor. It is a resistive sensor, but it doesn't. It has this granular matrix inside, and the granular matrix is designed to emulate the root. So the water will draw out of the sensor at the same rate that a plant would need for it to extract it. So it kind of correlates that measurement. And the way you read it is with a very specific signal. You send a 50 microsecond pulse and then a negative one to discharge the sensor. And then you read the resistance in that 50 microseconds. So you need a microprocessor to decode the signal, and then you process it through this huge equation, and then it gives you a very precise centibar value of the water potential, and it's accurate without temperature compensation. So anywhere between 20 and 24 degrees, it doesn't need any. Yeah, that green thing on the right, tensiometer
yeah.
is the okay. So the watermark basically works on the same principle as a tensiometer, but it has an electronic interface. And so I developed my product around that sensor. Um, but the one thing I discovered, oh, and here's the thing: when we're working with these live soils, these commercial live soils, they call them live soils because usually they're just like, and this is where I met you, I think, when I told you, what is this stuff? Because it's not soil. It's 50% of it is just this cocoa or whatever biomass. It's not
Yeah, we call those low tension soils,
right. So,
or soils media is another one.
so that sensor doesn't work on low tension soil. But I came up with this idea that if I would coat the sensor, if I would create, when I was learning about soil horizons, and I think learning about soil horizons is where I discovered one of your talks on YouTube. And I thought if I created an artificial A horizon around the sensor, I could help it um, sense the low tension soil. And I contacted Aerometer, and they said no, it's going to wash away or whatever. So I said, well, what if it's thick enough and it includes part of the substrate? So I decided to create this mix, um, which was sand, clay, and part of the low tension soil. And I made a mix with that in certain proportions, and I coated the sensor around it about 3-4 millimeters wide. And then I planted the sensor in a very specific place in the pot where I thought, would be because the sensor will dry last. Obviously, if it has clay, it'll be the last thing to dry. So I placed it on the side towards the bottom, but not completely at the bottom. I even made a little base so it wouldn't fall down. And then I started getting, because this sensor will stall at about 50 centibars if you don't, on a low tension soil. And the reason is there's no conductivity after so it's easy to drain out some of the water, but then to extract the rest of the water, you need, you know, clay is the conductor of the water in the soil, clay and sand. So the proportion of sand and clay, well, you know, the soil triangle, there's a sweet spot called loamy sand or sandy loams, right? There are two. It's either sandy or loamy, but they're loamy sands and sandy loams. That is a sweet spot of that sensor of the watermark. But with that coding, I was able to get full reading, 200 centibar reading out of that thing, out of that sensor, and that's where I was able to steer the pepper plant effectively into producing huge yield, and very, very good tasting peppers. Um, I mean, the plant just thrived in that thing. And this wasn't using soil horizons or anything. It was trying to replicate the problem that the cannabis growers were having on the low tension soils. Um, so the way they do it, as far as I understand it, is these low tension soils are basically just a a good substrate, but the biology comes from the teas, right? From the liquids that they brew and then they put on the soil. So that I think jumpstarts the biology in the soil, and then you create um, uh, fungus, and then that should create a mycelium network, and that should start kicking off the nutrient production. Uh,
Nutrient system. Yep.
yeah. So I was able to replicate that with peppers in the lab, and I was able to read consistently the water potential on the low tension soil for the 90 days of the crop. And then I thought we were onto something. I already had a product that actually worked on low tension soil. But then I discovered what you were doing in creating full horizons. Um, and then I got interested in that. And I think that's a better idea than the low tension soil. I did one or two experiments in that regard, but then I left. That's when I left to Europe about a year ago. Um, One of the things that I discovered in the last experiment was that the sensor, because it was the only thing that had clay and sand, it turned out to be the place where I could see the mycelium interface with the plant. So then I started thinking, well, I knew about the electrical signals of fungi, okay, um, but I didn't know if people were actually, understanding what was going on. So there was a lot of speculation about this. The mycelium is the internet of the forest, what have you. But I hadn't seen concrete scientific study of these electrical signals until I discovered a paper in 2022 um, that really got me interested in this idea. And I started thinking, well, if I already have a long-term sensor in the soil, it could act as an antenna to read those voltage spikes from the fungi and try to understand what's happening in the soil. Um, and this is where I am right now, is in that particular area. That's why I got interested in the truffles, because the truffle is a a fungi that infects the plant just like any other fungus that interfaces with plant roots. So this is where I'm researching right now, is in the language of the fungi. Because if we understand that, that is the ultimate sensor, is talk to the fungi. Because they know what's going on in the soil. And as you know, they're the broker of the nutrient system in the soil, and the principal actor, right?
And the architect.
Right. So if we understand they're saying, then I think we could provide farmers with some tools, man, that they dreamed of. Saying, oh, we have some calcium depletion or whatever. Try to understand what's going on. In fact, I have this experiment. I don't know if this is actually, theoretically, from what we've talked about, if I take, let's say I take a bunch of coffee grains, coffee waste, from,
Yeah.
and I cultivate any kind of mushroom on that, which mushrooms thrive in that. I think it's a little bit acid, so I think coffee grinds are the ideal growing substrate for these like oyster mushrooms and um, commercial.
Actually, actually, there's a recipe there. Well, there's a number of recipes, but it's basically like wood pulp and soy meal, and they sterilize it and then they seed it. But you can get
Yeah.
yeah, you can get spent mushroom substrate from any mushroom grower because they can only use it once, because as soon as they open that bag up, they've contaminated the matrix and
Right.
they can reuse it. So I use a ton of that stuff up at Peach Hill. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
My guess, if you combine that with soil horizons, and let's say that we provide a bed where the where the fungi can actually go and fetch. My guess is if you have this sterile soil, sterile coffee grind, it's not even soil yet, and you create the adequate biology and you have access to the materials, to the different, let's say that that's your O horizon, and then you create the ones in the bottom.
Yeah, the A&E.
Theoretically, over time, you should find nutrients in that coffee that was not there before, right? That would be an experiment I'm interested to run.
So let's reel it back a little bit, because you and I know what you're talking about, but the audience doesn't, because we had a conversation about this on Sunday. So when you learned about how specifically mycorrhizae, there has not been a lot of studies done on saprophytes yet, but I'm sure there will. Paul Stamets has shown videos of, in the lab where people are actually measuring these micro or nanovolts, millivolts of communication between these different fungi. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So for the audience, just go out and chase Paul Stamets and his work, and you'll see exactly what Alex is talking about. Now, you've met a gentleman, which is, I guess, let's wrap him in here now, over in when you were over in Spain. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about what happened and why you reached out to us?
Okay, so in Spain, I I learned that the truffle farms are suffering from climate change. Regardless of what you think the origin of climate change is, the rain patterns in Spain are changing dramatically. And Spain is a country that is lacking of water historically. It's um, it's a very arid land. It's a very rich soil land, but lack of water. Water is a big deal in Spain. Um, and these truffle farms, their production have been reducing without without stop for the past 20 years, and nobody knows why. So there have been several studies as to why the truffles are producing less and less size and less quantity overall. And I was telling Leighton that these farms are based on oak trees, and the production starts 20 or 30 years after you plant the oak tree. You can imagine, 100, 200,000 or 300,000 tree farm that you invest on for 30 years to start getting the yields after that. Okay. So it's a huge touristic problem because these farms are also touristic attractions. Um, and obviously, the truffle is a very important crop for Spain, the black truffle. It's called the black Spanish truffle, and it's one of the widest used in food everywhere. So it's not as expensive as the white truffle from Italy or France, but it's more popular in the kitchen. So it's the preferred truffle worldwide, and Spain is the principal producer of that. So I came across a study that they discovered that the rain patterns is the thing that affected the growth the most, but they didn't understand why. That immediately caught my attention because the machine that I developed was specifically to deal with the situation, to replicate or to compensate changing weather patterns, and irrigate, micro irrigate as needed. Reading that, I went back to the conversations we had, years prior with the A horizon and the fungi and whatever, and I started researching more and more about this electrical signals of the fungi, and I stumbled upon the work of Andrew Adamatsky. Okay, Andrew Adamatsky is a scientist that was able to decode. First, was able to understand that the fungi actually have a language, a sophisticated language with specific words. Okay, and I discovered the paper, and I met the guy over email and over the phone. And the paper is published in the Royal Society of Open Science. I linked it to Ken. I think you guys can share it on screen.
Yeah, he's posted it up already.
All right. So this paper um, proves that the fungi have a very specific language, and he was able to decode, if I'm not mistaken, around 50 words. Okay, that the fungi use in their communication. So this whole notion that the mycelium network is an actual network in the forest, like an internet of the forest, is actually factually true, and that the fungi is able to communicate across vast distances with different messages that have specific meanings, and that these guys have an actual language, which is completely mind blowing because you're talking about something that is, you know, if you look at it, is it's inanimate, you know, but the thing actually has language, and it's been proven by this paper. These experiments are scientifically controlled, meaning they're reproducible. Anybody can go and replicate them. So I contacted him and I asked him, hey, can we use your knowledge to understand what makes these truffles grow? And he said, absolutely. All you need is the will and the time for the experiment. It could take 2 to 5 years to find out, but we can actually understand what that fungi needs to grow. That in turn could be, imagine what you can do in a regenerative farm or in a purely biological growing environment if you could understand what it is that these guys are talking about under your soil. If you could work with the fungi instead of against it, I think it would be groundbreaking for agriculture. And
What's funny is last Friday I was at I gave a presentation at a local ranchers regenerative agricultural workshop. It was a really good turnout, probably 100 people. And they were talking a lot about the relationship with different plants and plants communicating with themselves. And they were big proponents of mycorrhizal fungi. And one of the main issues is out here, as you well know, is water, just like in Spain. Mm-hmm. And so, it's all about, well, how can we save water without affecting the biology or the trees or the living systems? Let's call it a system, because that's really what it is. And of course, when I was listening to these guys do their presentations, I was like, oh my God, Like they have no idea how easy it is to like save out of the gate 50% water just by applying compost and some chips on top that just holds the water like a sponge. And of course, you flashed into my mind. And I was like, fuck. Imagine if we had Alex's system, installed the compost and the chips around the base of the tree. We could save them 50, 70% water out of the gate. But then on top of that, you probably could save more because of your algorithm and your steering, and they would get higher yields. I mean, that would be nuts, dude.
Well, let me tell you something that proves that we're on the right track. So I contacted the author of the study that found out the reason that the production is diminishing in the black truffle in Spain. He's the number one authority of black Spanish truffle in Spain. Okay. He never answered, but his assistant answered. That's how this guy thinks he's important. Okay. Now, his assistant, they have a company, a private company in Spain that does service to truffle farms. I had a few video meetings with the guy, with the assistant. When I showed him my machine, the first question was, how much does your technology cost per point? And I said 60 to 100 bucks per um, per plant or per tree or whatever. And the guy turned pale, okay? And he said, well, we're working on a system for about 1,500 per plant. I never heard back from them again.
Oh man.
I reached out to them a million times. I was like, man, we're on the right track. I know that we can talk to the fungi. We have all this other thing. Never heard from them again. So that means that this problem is huge. And but he did reveal something that I think he felt he stuck his foot in the mouth, and then his boss maybe got pissed at him, and I never heard from him again. He said, we don't need to water the tree, we need to water the truffle. And I already knew that from before talking to him. That was my idea. And obviously they're looking at building the same thing, but when they knew I had a patented, valve or whatever, they completely, so instead of partnering, I think they became very suddenly felt threatened that we would have a potential solution for this problem. And since they're the most respected people in that area, I think they felt very threatened that we had a technology that would solve this problem. That's my guess.
Oh no!
Never an email again. The guy never.
Yeah,
I told him like 5 times.
Yeah, you're spot on, dude. That's that. We talked about that on Sunday. It's so hard nowadays because everybody's threatened by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you're better than them, they're going to badmouth you till the day they die because they're afraid of you. And any of these emerging technologies are just getting stifled. They're getting stymied because the ones that are in control don't want these things out there. And to be honest with you, like if I remember correctly, I think you had like one station and you could have, what was it, like 6 or 12 individual sites that you could water from with one.
Yeah. So the system currently, like one watering station can handle 64 plants, and the whole system put together like a Lego can handle up to 304,000 plants. Individual watering points.
Mm-hmm.
Could be plants or zones or trees or but and it's all wireless, right? By radio and it's below 1 gigahertz, so there's no microwave radiation from the radios, and very little wiring. It's all solar powered. You can power the whole system with the sun. So, but it's sad that instead of creating as like synergy, they would rather they would rather go on their own and reinvent, something that we've already got well advanced, right? Like the micro irrigation system, which is basically what I created. But I'm gonna keep down this path. I want to do these, like, I really, really um, interested in the electrical language of the fungi. Um, and I'm gonna keep going down that slope. Obviously, I'm gonna keep developing my basic product without it. The basic water potential watering or micro irrigation system has many applications as is. But if I start understanding how to talk to the fungi, it's a different ballgame. And I'm planning it on being an adapter, like an extension to so you can get the existing system as is for micro irrigation, and then add the component um, to talk to
Fungi.
the fungi. Yeah.
Well, how did so obviously the relationship has ended, but how do you anticipate being able to get the information from these guys
I
on
don't.
what the language is?
I think that in the short term, and I already found a few, people are going to start jumping out of the truffle business and start selling these farms like there's no tomorrow. I found a few small farms at around 100 to 150,000 euros. And theoretically, the yield from that should be more than they're selling the farm. So I think a lot of people are getting desperate of the situation. And what I want to do, really, if you ask me, is just buy out one of these farms or do the research myself with. Okay, so I mentioned this was in Spain, they use oak trees. Okay,
Mhm.
the oak tree is very resilient, and that's part of the reason they use these trees is they last forever. Um, but the hazelnut tree is also able to produce truffles. Okay, and they're doing this in Oregon. And the reason they don't do it in the east is because there's some other fungi um, that affects hazelnut. Now, I have a theory, and it's that if you infect the tree prior with the truffle fungi, and we determine the biology to avoid the other infestation, we might be able to experiment with hazelnut trees anywhere in the east coast. I mean, because I'm in Toronto, so I have the same problem as anybody trying to grow the hazelnut trees in this part of the world. Um, and the thing with the hazelnut is that you don't have to wait the 20, 30 years. The yield will start around year 4 or 5 of the hazelnut tree. And you can learn the fungi development throughout that phase. And this guy Andrew, he already sent me the whole the his whole experimental methodology is documented, and he sent me the parts list and everything, and the micro sensors that I need to buy. I mean, it's open source. Anybody could do it. You have to buy these very specific sensors, and the way the experiment is set is all open information. So one of the things I want to do is start experimenting with the hazelnut tree, because you can learn the fungal communication when the tree is still a sapling.
Mhm.
You know, a year-old tree already has they sell them in the UK 60 pounds each, already infected with the truffle. So that the root systems already has the truffle fungi in it. So you can actually listen to the electrical signals of that and learn even without the truffle being produced. You can learn and understand and decode the language of that particular fungi, which is probably very similar to any fungi that Adamansky used. You know, the language is probably going to be very similar. You know.
Yeah, no, what you're saying about it's called competitive exclusion. So if you are the first fungi to start
Exactly.
chewing up the sites, because there's only a limited number of sites on any one route, then the other competition can't get in there.
Hmm.
So it makes all the sense in the world, especially if they inoculate them as a bare root plant, and then they could ship them anywhere.
Hmm.
Um, that it makes sense. Now, there's a lot of hazelnut production out here in on the West Coast, whether it's
On the
Oregon,
West Coast. Yeah.
yeah, even down here in well, not Southern California, but parts of California, they do have a lot of nut trees being produced. So I bet you could probably snap right into one of those. Now, the question is when you read that paper, did he ever indicate like what that summer rain was? Maybe 1 inch every week or
Yeah.
half inch every three
Yeah.
days?
The truffle paper is very well documented. They know exactly like the rain pattern that produces the highest yield.
Wow,
That part is known. In
wow.
fact, so my machine could work already. And that's why I was thinking of buying a farm. Um, you know, maybe find a partner and buy a truffle farm that's not producing. Um, you know, it's high risk, but at least it's my own farm. I don't have to deal with these people. You know,
So you're thinking of going back to Spain?
well, it's cheaper for me to buy the hazelnut tree and grow them here. So
I got you.
yeah, but I don't know how I don't know how to deal with the winter though. I'd have to do maybe a CEA thing, buy
Yeah, some
rent a
people.
warehouse or something.
Yep, absolutely. We would definitely have to do that.
Yeah, and that would solve the problem of the pest too,
Yep.
because you get rid of or you reduce the possibility of infestation, right? So
Yeah. Well, you definitely cut it back, but you'd have to get into some biocontrols.
yeah, for sure.
You know, the spores are on you. They're in your hair and on your fingernails. I mean, they're everywhere. So it's
Yeah,
not you can totally eliminate that possibility of infestation. That's the hard part about CEC. You're providing the ultimate environment for any kind of pest to just explode because you don't have that competition.
right.
That was another big thing, a big takeaway on that regen lecture on Friday, or that workshop, was that what people don't understand is if you just stop killing shit and you encourage nature, you plant some pollinator gardens, you
Yeah,
plant some border plants,
yeah.
the guys are going to come back, and then you're not going to have to kill them. And one of the guys was super interesting. He talked about, they did a study on pest pressure in these orchards, and what they realized was the pest volume was 2 to 3 times greater than the volume in the affected pest system, where the pests were damaging the plant, devastating the plant. So you had 2 to 3 times more of that pest in this system, but that pest was now a food. It was part of the ecosystem. So it wasn't ever affecting the plant at all, which is just is staggering if you think about it. 3 times the pressure and no adverse effects whatsoever. It was just now just a part of the food chain.
Out of balance. Any system out of balance.
Right? So yeah, we know for a fact that, like, in a natural setting, that it's way easier to manage if you do encourage nature to come back, but in a controlled environment, it's way more difficult because you don't have the open access to encourage the local indigenous predators to come in and keep everything at bay. So, even the work what I did with Susan Wainwright, Bug Lady, we talked about creating ecosystems in CEC environments. And her stance was always, no, you can't do it. There's just no way.
You can do it.
Yeah,
The guys, Utah, Canada's guys. What's his name? Russell. You remember? There's this guy. These guys are doing it, and the you can't do it in pots. You need to do it in beds. When you do beds, large beds, then you create a you start creating a whole system.
Yeah,
Then
you create a soil system, but it's not the above ground system. So the above ground system is where you have the bugs, and the birds, and the little toads and
yeah,
frogs.
you need the animals to shit on the thing
Yep.
and die. Also, you need a lot of the yeah. But you could do it if the CEC is not completely CEC. I mean, if it's part
Right. If you had half of it open up during the
during the
spring,
summer, yeah,
and then just
and then
close,
try to replicate the environment in the winter.
yeah, or just close it down in the winter, and whoever makes it through until spring. But at
Hmm.
least you'd capture a balance of predators versus prey in your controlled environment. So, and
Hmm.
that was always my bitch with Susan was like, no, I think we can do it. Like I agree, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be like what it could be outside, but at least it'd be a step in the right direction to prevent these kinds of infestations. But again, she's into the NPK world of container growing, and so I understand like these container growers they only make like a nickel, so it's not. So unfortunately, they don't have the money to really invest in some of
Okay,
these.
we're getting a really bad echo, guys. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Alex, you have your phone on?
No, but I'll mute while you're talking just in case it's me.
Okay, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it was me, but anyway, so yeah, they don't make enough money to invest in these types of IPM alternative, getting away from synthetics and more into the biologicals. I mean, they use predatory pests and they use cards to determine what their pest pressure is, but they just won't ever make that jump into what it really needs to happen is you need a complete biological soil system to prevent the insects from emerging or from taking over because there's no competition. But that's a whole nother song and
Well, the
dance.
farmer is a tough sell because they have to be patient, and it could take a few years to generate a balanced ecosystem.
Mhm.
It takes in what 6 years, maybe 5 to 6 years, and people, you know, don't have the pockets to go that route, right? I mean, they want the yield. They worry when things go out of balance. They don't have the patience to let it sort itself out. There's a good documentary on regenerative on Netflix, and you can see the struggle of the farm. I mean, it's very hard to quit. Sorry, very easy to quit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you remember the name of the documentary?
Yeah, I'll find it while we're talking.
Okay.
Let's start you.
Yeah, the guys that were doing the workshop basically said, it usually takes 3 to 5 years, depending on how aggressive you get on the front side to making this transition. So you're spot on, and it's still money out of pocket because you're adding seed, you're adding labor to mow, or animals to eat back the grasses at certain times, and so it's definitely a big commitment to push into this space. But once you get there, as they said, a lot of the farmers that they go back and visit now, who are successfully transitioned, like their farm managers are worried about their jobs because there's not as much work to do anymore. And so what basically Chuck, I think was his name, was like, oh, dude, there's plenty more things that you can do. Like we can make more work that's just going to continuously make this system better and better and better and better. So it's just a matter of, all right, you're not mowing today or you're not spraying chemicals today. You're building compost today, or you're planting border gardens or pollinator gardens, or you're planting vegetables and you're harvesting vegetables for you, your family, and all the other workers. So it kind of like it's an amazing thought to think that all of a sudden now you're not spending any time killing, you're just spending time improving, right? And with that improvement comes bigger yields, which means more money for the farmer, also additional bumper crops, whether they're vegetables, potatoes, tomatoes, it doesn't matter. Or maybe you start doing cuttings from your trees. So there's all kinds of other opportunities once you get through the transition period to increase the value of the farm without increasing costs or labor. So again, it works. You just got to be patient, like you said.
That's the key, is that once it's going, it'll hardly break. So the long-term benefit is huge if you're able and you're willing to invest at the beginning. So, you know, that's the trade-off, is that it's I mean, it's not that there will be no yields in those first years. It's just that the the problems, the work is going to be so hard and the yields are going to be compromised for a while until you get the system in balance. That's the link. Ken just published that on the video. It's called The Biggest Little Farm.
Oh yes, yeah, that's been around for a minute.
2018. Yeah, it's an old movie, but it's I guess you can feel in a movie, you feel the frustration and the risk of going that route, and how easy it is to just pull the plug and say, man, it's too hard, you know.
You know what's cool is when I relocated out here to Oxnard, one of the first stops that there was this gentleman who we call the compost evangelist, and he heard me talking about the work that I do, and he's like, "Oh, all right, I want you to meet Molly and Ben." And I'm like, "Okay, who's Molly and Ben?" He goes, you'll know when you get there." So we hopped in a car together, drove over. I got to meet them and talk to them, and they're like, "Hey, after listening to me talk for a little while, would you like to come over and do a demonstration for all our employees?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." So I got to hang out with a lot with Molly, less so with Ben, but even still, we talked for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes about what it was like to go through that. And he said, "Yeah, Leighton, it was serious shit." I go, "Well, kudos to you, because I mean, going on camera, being documented through struggles like that, that's pretty powerful." I mean, I felt what you did, Alex. I felt the guy's pain when he was like trying to kill the coyotes and lost all the ducks, and all the trials and tribulations of trying to make this leap. And I think the guys from the Regen workshop had the correct approach, and that is, it's up to you. Like, you can start cutting your fertilizer back now. You can start cutting your pesticides back now by doing these types of things, like planting the pollinator garden. That's going to bring in the predators to attack the insect pressure. So you're reducing it slowly, but you're improving as you're going along. And that's, again, why it takes 3 to 5 years. But they don't lose yield. They just don't spend as much money on the expenses of killing.
You might lose yield if you get something really out of whack, like
Yeah.
some pest, and then you don't have the right predator or whatever. So it won't be perfect the first few years, but it's not like you're not making any money. It's just you put in a lot of work, and it's very frustrating to get the system in balance. Now that you mention transitioning, I met these other folks in Europe that you will find absolutely fascinating. Okay, these guys are called, I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're called Soil Ecology Lab. Okay, they're in the UK, and guess what they invented? And they're clever. They invented a bag of fertilizer that is 1-to-1 with the NPK in terms of application. So the farmer just needs to, instead of buying this product, they buy this other bag of stuff. Okay. Now their stuff is brewed in these huge bioreactors with wood chips, and they're working together with an arbory, a very big arbory, who's financing part of this project in the UK, who's using so they basically brew. It's like just like the teas that are brewed for cannabis, but this is a very large scale bioreactor bags. Okay.
Okay.
And they produce this stuff that farmers can replace 1-to-1 with their NPK, and use it in the same way. And what it does, it just spreads all these microbes and turns the soil live, and you can use it season after season, and bring back life into the soil. They actually proved out their concept, and they have documented increased yields, um, with less water usage. I mean, less pesticide. That well, the whole pitch, the whole enchilada. But they produce something that a farmer that is using traditional methods could actually, even tilling. I mean, they don't have to change anything except, don't buy the bag from the petrochemical buy it from these guys.
So I wonder if it's organic fertilizer. So
Yeah,
so
I think it is 100%. Look into them. I can introduce you guys through email and phone or whatever. They actually were interested in the sensor for the bag. They're having a hard time keeping the humidity at a certain level.
oh, dude, I found a bag. Like you have no idea. I've been looking for bags for years to try to find a way that I can put my biologically complete or intensive compost and not have it dry out and not get cooked by the sun. I got it, dude.
Well,
I got it.
and sell it to these guys, man. I mean, sell them the idea, because I had no solution for them. They wanted me to try to apply the watermark sensor to that problem. I said it's unlikely I can solve your problem. But then the arbory called me. The owner of the arbory called me because he wanted a sensor for the saplings. But honestly, I didn't have the time or the energy, and I kind of just let them, I actually feel bad because they were very interested in actually paying me money to go there and try out but I just couldn't do it. But if we get in contact with them, I think their idea is actually quite interesting, because any farmer could use their product instead of NPK.
Yep. And especially at the cost of NPK right now. And I'll be honest, like early on in my work, whenever I talk to organic fertilizer or organic land care companies, right, that was always their number one complaint. We spread this stuff on the soil and it just sits there. It never goes into the soil. And I'm like, that's because you use herbicides. And they're like, what does that have to do with it? I go, because you kill all the biology. If the biology's in the soil, that shit's going to disappear in a couple of days.
Yeah, man.
It's going to get consumed. And so without the biology, no, that shit's going to just sit there and rot. It's not going to do anything.
Well, the cool thing about soil biology is that they have the method, right? The soil ecology lab would probably be interested in co-licensing or co-working with somewhere in America to reproduce their product. I mean, it would be stupid to ship it from the UK to here.
No, it'd be crazy.
It would be much smarter to create the bioreactors here in America and sell it to local farmers. So I think that could be an opportunity. Anybody listening to this should explore with them. And I could surely, if you have the money or the interest in doing it, contact these guys and figure out a way to, because this could be something that I saw it, and they saw it so simple too. You don't have to sell any dramatic change to the farmer. To switch out your NPK and use this stuff, and you're going to use a lot less pesticide, you're going to use a lot less stuff. And because they know that the farmer's going to make the mistakes of tilling, they're going to keep doing their thing. They can just supply the product next year or next, and it gives enough biology for the crop. So I thought it was a genius idea, man. They really thought it well, because it's a very easy way to convince a farmer, just try this out. If it's the same, why are you going to keep paying for NPK? If it's toxic and it doesn't, you get better yields with this stuff. I think they got 20% increase in one of the experiments. We're talking same farmer, same land, same process, everything. Just switch your NPK for this product. You get 20% more yield, and you get, I don't know what the decrease was in pesticide, but it was off charts too. So
definitely connect us via email.
I will.
All right, and I'll reach out.
They're honest. I mean, they're very cool people, and I'm sad I couldn't help them more with their humidity problem. If you have a solution for that, they probably really want to hear it. In fact, I'm going to introduce you in that term.
Yep, that's fine.
Leighton mentioned that he had a solution for your problem. Go ahead and
Have at
and you can meet them that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're great guys, man. I think they have a really good idea in their hands. A farmer can adopt it easily without changing a lot of his, idiosyncrasy or their methods, right?
Yep.
And then once they understand that it is the biology that could make it better, then they can probably stop tilling or find alternative ways of planting that are not so aggressive. I should say aggressive. Maybe is the right term.
That's fine. I mean, aggressive, yes, or concern. I mean, there's just so many reasons why people don't want to change, and I think that was another big takeaway about at that conference was there was a lot of younger people there. There's a couple older farmers, but basically it's the younger farmers or the next generation that's coming in that's really kind of pushing this like, hey, we got to change. We can't just keep doing this. And so before, the last few years, I've always heard, I don't want to learn nothing new. We've been doing it this way for 30 years. It works fine, blah, 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 blah. But now there's kind of a paradigm shift in the masses saying, whether it is the older time guy saying, I want to leave something behind, or whether it's the younger farmers who are saying, we got to change. There's definitely more interest in all of these, whether they're regenerative, whether they're organic, whether it's just subsidizing and cutting back on the use of all of these things. Mm-hmm. Something else that people don't understand is the fertility that's built up in our soil at this point is ridiculous. It'll last thousands of years because the fertilizer companies just keep selling you product. They don't care what the pool is in the ground. They're telling you, oh, you got to do this. You got it. You're going to yields are good. You're going to fail. You're going to have all these problems.
It's not just them. It's industry wide everywhere. The planned obsolescence is part of the model in your computer, in your phone, in your tractor. Everything is meant to be outdated very quickly, so you have to buy it again. And it's all about the service model now. And the same thing, Monsanto and the seed. The seed, is they're usually seedless plants, meaning you buy the seed once, but the plant won't produce any seed, and that's on purpose. So you buy the seed again next year. So it's all about repetitive. It's all about that
planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence and subscription model.
Yep.
It's all about subscription now. Look at how many things you're paying for monthly, and you don't know. Oh, it's only $10 a month. It's only $3 a month. Whatever. And then you look at your bill and you're like, oh my God, where did they spend the $500? Yeah.
I
catch you on the cheap subscription.
I actually had a conversation with my sister last weekend. We were just catching up, and she was complaining about her credit cards creeping. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Your credit card creeps? Mm-hmm. She goes, well, all of a sudden, my credit card bill used to be $300 a month. Now it's $600 a month. And I have to go in there and figure out what happened. And she goes, it's all these little subscriptions. The kids click on the wrong button, or I click on the wrong button on my computer. And next thing I know, I bought something I didn't even know. And I'm not using it because I didn't even know I have it. And I'm paying for it. And I'm like, yep, you're spot on, dude. It used to be a pure economic-based system. Mm-hmm. Of getting the economy, getting more people to buy more stuff. Now it's both that plus planned obsolescence, with the military-industrial complex taught us. Mm-hmm. So the government would have to buy new all the time. And then the subscription-based shit that's happened in the last 20 years where
the microtransaction,
wherever you have a computer or an iPhone, these apps, you got to have this, you got to have that. Oh, this is kind of a nice feature, but like you said, the next thing you know, a year later, the fucking thing you paid $3 for is now $6.
Dude, Roblox, the game Roblox, all the kids play Roblox. They have Robux in there. You buy, it's $2, $3, $7, and they give you a whole bunch of Robux. And man, just by my kid comes, oh, I need this thing, I need to respawn, or I need this flying vest or whatever. Oh, it's $3, $2, and I can realize 1 month I spent like 150 euros in Robux. I was like, when did this happen? And it was just interruptions. They come at every moment. You're not expecting it. And you just approve it. The amount is so small. It's called a microtransaction model, and it's very effective, man. Because it's like gambling. You just realize So I think the whole economic system is built around this, whether it's agriculture or whatever. They all think the same way now. I want you to spend. I want the thing to break down in a programmed way, and I want you to subscribe to my cloud or whatever system because I want recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is a big deal. And I mean, if they were giving a lot of value for it, it would be worthwhile. Like, for example, I pay $700 a year for Autodesk Fusion 360. Okay, that's expensive, but I really use the tool, so I don't think it's expensive when you look at it in the big in what I do with the tool, right? So that's something I'm happy to pay, and I also pay another CAD tool, which is like $200 or $300 a year. But I know I can do with that tool 20 minutes, what it would take me, 3 days to do on another tool. So to me, it's worth every penny. But when you start out the little ones, man, the little subscriptions are the ones that are crazy and that get out of hand really quickly. It's I don't know, Audible, $15 a month. Doesn't sound much, but when you add it, to the other one and the Netflix and the other one, and then it's a bunch of money. Man. Yeah. So I think that all the agricultural suppliers are working the same way. John Deere, they all sell these satellite systems now and all this GPS. It's all subscription model. Monsanto, long. You don't even need to talk about their evils. Everybody understands what they are. But so all of them are the same problem.
How did we wander into this rabbit hole again?
Oh, because it's it's part of the
sidetracked.
It's part of the reality that we live. You can't escape the bigger picture.
No, you have to play within the fucking rules.
Well, why are we eating this shit food to begin with, bro?
Well, because they want to keep us sick, so that we buy more.
They want to keep us selling medicine.
Yeah.
So it's the whole pharma is involved in this whole thing as well. So it's not like a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's an actual conspiracy.
It's a fact. It's not even anything to do with conspiracy.
It's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Look at any movie from the 1970s and shit. I mean, there's no fat people. There's no people live. They smoke like crazy, and they reach old age anyway. So I think that a lot of these things are on purpose. Changing the farmer. So let's save the farmers, but who is going to prevent us from doing that is a pharma company.
Yep.
Not
like we were talking about on Sunday. I mean, like Ecosphere Sciences had, I don't know how many deals, 6 on the table, whether they were purchases or investors, and all of a sudden fucking crickets chirping. It's like, wait a minute, we were all hot and heavy. We had all these meetings. We documented all this stuff. We provided all this information. Where the fuck did they go? Why is it just crickets chirping now? And it's the same with you. Like, remember when you were trying to get investment, we were getting you talks with, who's the guy's Blue Mat? I forget the name of their business. And, there was all hot and heavy, excited, and then it just, poof, disappeared.
Yeah, Blue Mat can't do more than maybe, with luck, you can get 100 centibars with, and usually not more than 60. And it's constant dripping. Also, it's not like programmed. They know that this thing is way. But who's interested in the real things? Nobody. People are interested in the rapid flip. The AI or whatever. You mention anything else along those lines, and you get all the money in the world. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't help anybody. But the real things take time, and they're not going to be a quick flip for an investor, so they don't care. They don't care. to
the
help.
investor model is how to buy it and then sell it. Has nothing to do with the value of the product or anything else. It's just about churn and burn, baby. Churn and burn. And that's sad.
Short-term gain, yeah.
Yeah, they strip all the money out of it, sell it to a new guy who now has a real expensive ROI because they've stripped everything out of it or jacked it up and inflated it. I think they call it kiting. They kite the value of it. And these guys are good at what they do, man, but they're not good for humanity. They're only good for their short-term gains.
They're not the partner that you want because you're not going to be able to realize the vision you started with. And I realized that after, failing with a few investors is that they were not interested. These agricultural investors were not interested in agriculture. They just happen to be in a hot sector.
Yep.
They're not interested in solving the problem. They're interested in just short-term gain.
Exactly. And that's again goes right back to that economic,
which is not bad. Again, I'm saying anything of these things are evil. They're just out of control.
Yeah.
They're not. We're all everything's out of balance right
now. So where are you are you ready to start manufacturing on small scale some of these systems?
So like I told you over the weekend, one of the things that I had to do on an emergency was figure out a way to take the product apart, ship it, and reassemble it, elsewhere. And I was able to do that, and now I'm shipping it back here to build it here again. Sorry, my desk is very unstable. I'm not in my future office is going to be in that little room over there, but
gotcha.
I'm still settling here.
So you're talking about when you left Spain.
No, when I left Canada to Spain, I had to take apart the product.
Yep.
And put it in a box somehow that it would survive the shipping to Spain. And that was the first time I realized that it was becoming a real product. Something that you can actually build and ship and take apart, put it in a box, ship it, build it, and replicate it. And so I was able to do that. And then I was able to take it apart again, put it in a box, and I'm shipping it back here. So at least that
exercise.
That exercise is crucial, to start thinking of how to put this thing in a box and ship it to people.
Right.
And so I'm very close to being able to ship you a unit, for example.
Nice.
Fortunately, I was able to, I have another company in the software engineering side, and that company has been doing well. And so I think that in the short to medium term, I'll have my own funding to kind of jumpstart prototype production.
Okay.
And with that, we should be able to send a few units out for people to test and play around with. So I have to find different applications. Probably most of them are going to be cannabis organic growers, which are the pain point that this machine was designed for. And then I was thinking of experimenting my own farm of something, have my own lab. Like I had here before, I had a grow tent with the peppers. I already know how to grow the peppers, but maybe grow something more complicated, something that's very hard to grow under CEA, like rice.
There you go.
So I wanted to go back to the rice idea. I was able to produce 11 grams of rice.
I think you told me that. I'd forgotten that you'd actually gone through the
6 plants, 6 individual tillers. And one thing about the rice plant, I don't know if we want to go down this.
Yeah. No, let's.
Okay, so the rice is, it's totally undervalued. In every conversation, people they don't understand how critical this crop is. Okay, and obviously you have Brazil and Asia, producing 70% of the rice, and then the U.S. is another big producer. And India. So it's India, China, US, and Brazil. I think that would be 95% of the market. but that crop is particularly sensitive to the climate. So if the water supply, the the wind, for example, the way the sun hits the whole biology around it. So if anything changes, the plant will simply, because it's a grass. But the, getting it to produce is, I think the relationship of productive tillers to non-productive tillers is very similar to like wild, your grass at home is very little. So I say it's like 10 to 1 or something like that. So one of the tricks, so I was reading a lot about rice at the beginning in 2015. And my first experiments were hydroponic cube, single plant, and with 6 plants, I was able to generate, rice, and it was very surprising to some people that I actually got the seed. And I think the only reason I got it because I did a wind simulator inside the tent. To move the plant, you need to make the plant swing in a way that it does in nature. So I observed several videos of rice fields in China, and
Okay.
I looked at how the wind moved. So I tried to replicate that with these fans that would move this way, and I got it because it's auto pollinator. It pollinates upon itself. So there's the emitter of the pollen, the receiver, like the female and the male
Yep.
are so you need to shake it for the pollen to fall down. You can't shake it too hard though. It has to be very. It's a very um,
Interesting.
yeah. So one of the things about rice is that I think for the first 2 or 3 months, it grows very fast at the beginning and then it stalls. It doesn't do anything for like 2 months or maybe three. And nobody knows what the plant does in that period, man. It just stays there. And then suddenly it goes wild and it starts tillering like crazy and it produces 1 or 2 productive tillers and then it dies. Okay. So, what happens in that period apparently determines the number of tillers. Okay. But nobody knows exactly. So, one of the motivations for me to create this machine was I wanted to run parallel experiments with different irrigation patterns, different chemicals, different, and I wanted to run them in parallel. And because it takes 9 months, 3 months to find out the result, I wanted to run all these experiments in parallel. And I needed a specific distribution system that could micro irrigate specific nutrients to each individual plant. So I could run, 100 different plants instead of six. Okay. And that's another reason I invented this valve. Um, I later found out that the valve was actually useful for cannabis growers, and then I saw the money over there. But I abandoned the rice. But I think rice is one of the things I really want to reconsider, um, because, for example, in space exploration, it would be very desirable to be able to grow rice, um, because it provides protein
Yep.
and good carbohydrate intake. So it's a very well-rounded food, and it's a staple food of the world. And it's where humans are very it suits us well. So the rice is one of those crops that is very complicated, and we can find solutions to increment yield on the controlled environment, or semi-controlled environment in organic uh, substrate or soil, like real soil. That would be tremendous for the world and for our future as a species, as a multiplanetary species.
So, so let me ask you this: like, I'm under the impression that during the growing season, the field is flooded, and then they drain it when it's time to harvest. Is that correct?
Most of the yeah, and actually they do it in
Terracing.
terracing. They terrace the ground and they flow the water very specifically. Um, I think the reflection of the sun rays. You know how the leaf is a very specific form. And I found out that the lighting, that's why I did the whole thing white, I remember, because there's the plant needs light, I think, from the bottom. And some people don't realize that the bouncing of the sun rays from the flooding is part of the way the plant works. But yeah, it's the growing techniques vary from place to place, but it is usually a flooded rice paddy, the typical. But it's not the only way to grow it.
Gotcha. Because obviously you didn't create a pond in your tent, right?
No, but I did use a a typical hydroponic flood and then drain, and I
Oh,
use,
yeah, ebb and flow, flood and drain.
yeah, I use rock wool as a substrate,
Gotcha.
and I use organic fertilizer from fish shit. Yeah,
From fish brew or fish shit, one of those guys.
yeah, it was already prepared, so I just bought it one's used for cannabis too. This is when I made friends with the cannabis crowd in Toronto.
Oh, you bought fish hydrolysate. That's what you bought.
Yeah, so here's how I discovered this whole thing. I was doing this thing in my house, and one day walking by mere chance, I saw a little hydroponic shop near my house, walking distance. Okay, so it was kind of meant to be. Um, so I walked over there and started talking to the guy, and as I'm talking, I see this movement in the store that is not, your typical, you know, how do you say,
Experience.
old lady gardener store. There's something else going on in that store that, and then obviously people smoking weed and shit. And it was like it had this ambience, right? And the owner was a trip. He was really knowledgeable, and he had worked in tomatoes for, Canada produces a huge amount of hydroponic tomatoes. It's a very big producer and very mature tomato producer. And this guy had worked in that, and then he went, and then he told me, after 2 3 visits, I realized this store lived a lot more from something else than. Um, so he taught me a lot, and he actually helped me a lot into set up the rice experiment. His name's Ian, and actually he owns a little piece of Agrami. I gave him, we like I, even though he never asked for anything or whatever, I told him, I would honor part of the foundational aspect of the company, because he actually helped me grow this rice, you know. So I decided to found it. I set aside a an amount of stock that he would own regardless. Um, and and he actually taught me how to set up the flooding system and the whole thing and the tent. And I bought most of the equipment from him, from his little store. Um, so it's a funny story that's how I made the cannabis crowd. And then with that, I found out the pain that they had irrigating the potted
Yep.
soil organic plants. And then I told him, hey, but I was inventing this valve. So when I talked to him about the valve, he was like, oh man, if you can solve that problem, anybody of my friends would buy it from you. And that's when I decided this was probably a good business to go
Yeah,
into.
and the other part of that puzzle is that you have up to 8 different chemicals or fertilizers that you can inject through that
Right.
one system.
So the basic version is just water. Obviously, you can put anything in the tank that you want. It doesn't have to be water. But then if you add another component, which is like the plus version that is not, let's say, if I was to commercialize it today, it would take a little bit longer, but that part has 8 tanks. So it's an accessory to the base product.
Yep.
So let's say with that plug-in, literal, you attach it to the main tank, then you have 8 different chemicals that you could specifically irrigate to. So if a plant lacks calcium, you can send it calcium only or whatever, Also for the sweetness, or whatever additive you want to add to the plant, you could do it up to 8 different ones, and schedule them. Now that software is not written. I have to confess, but
Oh, that's all right. You got to get the demand first anyway, right?
most of the hard work for that piece is done. And I actually had the 8 tanks working at some point or whatever. But the the algorithm for irrigation was actually, I thought it was an easy thing. Um, I underestimated that part heavily, and it turned out I scrapped it and rewrote it like 2 or 3 times in the 3 or 4 years that I did the experiments here in the basement. There's some videos I can link of me working at night in this very basement when it was not finished. Okay, crazy. It looked like the monster's house, and you can see the. I'll show you those videos. You're gonna laugh. They're quite funny. I actually built it. I made the videos for myself. I wanted to remember what it was like. Um, and in some of those videos, I appear quite crazy, quite demented. Uh, I was working till 2, 3 a.m. for what, 3 or 4 years in a row. So, um, that algorithm is I want to make it. I want to source it to the farmer. I want the farmer to be able to hack the product. Okay, because I think a lot of innovation comes directly from the person growing it. Like I don't pretend to. I don't want the technology to displace the green thumb.
Yep.
I want the technology to be a tool, just like your shovel or whatever. And that tool, you should be able to hack it. If you don't like this aspect or whatever, you should be able to go in and change the code and experiment and make the tool yours. I want people to buy it and hack it. It's like the old cars. You buy it and then you could add it, change the cam, or change the suspension or whatever. Like, I want the product to be open and repairable and hackable by the and also recyclable. I'm using general purpose electronics, um, in a way that people can repurpose them for something different, or we could take them back and recycle them into few other products. So the microprocessor that I'm shipping the technology with, you could actually reprogram it to do something else. Um, so I want these products to have like a long lifespan and repurpose, second life or third life or fourth life, um, so that they don't end up in landfill until they completely burn out. Just by the lifespan of electronics is very long. Um, one of these processors has a 100-year EEPROM life.
Nice. I
So
didn't realize that.
yeah, man, it's stupid what we do with consumer electronics and consumer electricals. A lot of this stuff could be repurposed, but we throw it away. And I think that part of the equation that I want to bake into Agromi is that the products that we build, I want them to be like recyclable. Like I'm only using specific plastics that I know that are either biodegradable or recyclable 100%. Um, like ASA, ABS, PLA. PLA is biodegradable, for example. And most of my things are printed in PLA. Oh, 3D printed. That's another thing. Everything in the product is 3D printed. So people could print their own spare parts. They don't depend.
That's huge.
Yeah. So I want people to have access. Like if they buy the product from me, they'll get the STL files. They can reprint the valve. They can do their own stuff as long as they don't commercially compete, and do whatever they want.
Well, that's awesome of you, dude. That's not very many people go into business to be an anti-business model, right?
It's not like a business, man. It's the way that companies like Apple grew. I mean, it's not. This is not a new thing either. A lot of companies were good companies in the past. Okay, it's not. I don't think that um, like I'll give you a good IBM. IBM, man. Out of all companies in the world, IBM. The IBM PC was an open computer. It had it when you bought the IBM PC, you got the schematics, the electronic schematics of the computer, and you also had the BIOS, the basic input output system was printed on one of the manuals. You could actually read the source code of the machine BIOS, and that's the reason why the Chinese cloned them, and they created a parallel market of IBM compatible PCs, and Microsoft screwed IBM because they had created the operating system IBM DOS. Then Microsoft created their own DOS, knowing that it would compete with IBM DOS. Bill Gates saw, who knows if even Bill Gates suggested to manufacture these things in China. Today, I wouldn't be surprised. But Microsoft made their big money by screwing IBM and creating a parallel disk operating system that was compatible with IBM, but was sold for IBM PC clones. So even companies like IBM, man, were very open to their consumers, But obviously, it didn't go so well for IBM, did it?
No.
But I don't have a Microsoft. I don't have a Microsoft, so I don't have that problem to fear.
So back then it was different. Like,
Yeah.
business was you worked with a company and you expected to spend your life there, and you got handed a pension and a gold watch, and you had a big party when you were done.
Mm-hmm.
But that all shifted with the monetary system, the greed that created the they call it barbarians at the gate, but it's hostile takeovers. You buy up stock, you get to be a point where you're a principal, then you push on to the board, then you push the board out, in the company, right? That was the
That happened to Steve Jobs.
Really
100%.
did.
That's exactly what happened to Steve Jobs at Apple.
Say again?
That's exactly what happened to Steve Jobs at Apple.
Right? Prime example of that. But I can remember, like, when I was a kid, talking about, my dad was a businessman. He was self-employed. He was a banker. He was actually kind of like the first venture capitalist, where he would take businesses that weren't credible, but if they showed that they were, like family owned and they had good employees and they had a good product, he would convince the bank managers to write the loan, and give these guys a shot at growing. And
that's a great point you're bringing. And before, people made companies for life. People founded companies with a vision and a mission for life.
Mhm.
It wasn't about flipping the company. So it wasn't that startup model that we have today, where you build a company to sell it. Okay.
Mhm.
Even people I talk today about Agrami and whatever, the first thing question is, what's the exit strategy? And I'm like, no, I want to croak on the desk of Agrami, man. I'm not building this to sell it, man. I hope I'm working when I'm 98, if I make it that far. And like the concept, outside of the US, this concept hasn't changed much. In Europe, people still build companies for life, and they die in their companies. Um, but then, innovation also happens at the startup level. So I don't think the startup model is necessarily evil because it does foster innovation, but there's also a lot of waste. Um, and there's a lot of bullshit in it, you know. And I think that itself has lost its essence as well. It's no longer innovative. It's all about, I don't know, moving capital from here to there, even money laundering. It lends itself well to the startup scene, right?
Oh, yeah. The amount of billions of dollars that got laundered. And I mean, like they had to put it somewhere. Like I have a choice. I can pay the government $40 million in taxes, or I can give this innovator $40 million and hopefully he can create something. Just create.
It's even more complicated. They give $1 million to 400 innovators, right? So then or 440. I don't know how many you said, but they distribute it in a way that's very complex for the government to even track what the hell's going on with the capital.
Yep.
I know VCs. I should probably be careful what I'm going to say. I know people that have all these companies, and they're all losing money, man. All these startups. One is crazier than the other. And you have to wonder, man, where's all this money coming from? And in the high-tech sector, especially in the fintech, there's people that own 10, 20, 30 different companies. And they're bleeding money out of their ass, like in a way that it's something's not adding up, and maybe these particular cases are not washing machines, but I'm sure that many are, and it would be almost impossible for the government to understand what the hell's happening in those companies.
No, and again, at the end of the day, it's like if you have billions of dollars, you're earning millions of dollars a day by default. Just in interest, and that's if you don't have it invested. Mm-hmm. Just by inflation alone, or not inflation, but what the fuck is it called? When it compounding. And so you got to get rid of it somewhere, right? Otherwise, if it accumulates, it just keeps accumulating.
If you keep the money in the movement, you're never cashing out, so you're never even paying the capital gains over that. You're just making more money over time, and you're not paying any taxes.
And you get to write it all off. Everything.
So even if you're not laundering money, you're still moving the money around to avoid paying taxes.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. So, I mean, that's the old saying: it takes money to make money, and that's where it comes from.
But I think that we can change that, and if something that you really like and do, you can do it in a better way. And I think that a lot of people used to do companies that way, and it's not a new thing. It's just something that's forgotten.
Agreed. And listen, we're getting close to the 2-hour mark. Before we go, do you have an ETA on when your first products will start rolling out for the audience?
Yes, actually, one of the ideas of staying put here for a while in Toronto is setting up a micro factory. So I think that for example, to guys like you and other people that have been shown interest in testing this, I think I could easily ship some units by end of year or Q1 next year.
Yeah. That'd be fantastic, dude. Yeah, I told you, man. I've been ever since we did that. I think it was Learn Living Soils.
Yeah.
And then we followed up with a podcast, or maybe it was vice versa. But I periodically get hit up from time to time on DMs.
I do too, man. But the problem is that I needed this time off, man. I'm really glad I stepped out of Canada for a while, because I was growing very bitter here of what was happening with the woke stuff and what have you, and the kids, and the shit with the kids, man, really got to me. The people were really weird, everything started getting very weird here. So I'm happy I got perspective. I distanced myself from the problem. I distanced my kids from the problem. I got, a better perspective of what's happening, and I needed a rest too, man. I was just working too hard. So I'm, like recharge batteries and moving forward again. And it's not easy to build a product, especially not by yourself without
And
a lot of funding. Yeah.
and work.
And work and keep the family and be a father. So, but it's basically there, man. I just need a little push and a little money. And fortunately I have the energy now, the perspective, a different mindset, and soon I'll have a little bit of money to invest back into Agrami and get it going. So
Nice.
that's
All
where
right.
I am right now.
Well, we'll definitely get you back on, if not sooner, later to see how you're doing and get an update from you, so that we can get the word out, because believe it or not, but there's people from all over the freaking world listening to this thing. Australia, UK, Germany. It's nuts. Like, I never anticipated that kind of following, and that's just the people that are on the chat. I mean, there's still a ton of people listening to it after the fact. So the word will get out. If we let people know or keep them updated on you and remind them where to go to talk to you, and hopefully place pre-orders. Ken, do we have any questions? I didn't see anything.
We just had one earlier, but it was answered in the chat. Our chat is absolutely amazing. And yeah, they are from all over the world coming to listen to this. And Alex, we definitely need to have you back on, because crop steering with water and what you've managed to create is absolutely amazing and needs to be highlighted.
Especially in places where water is getting scarcer. I mean, it's going to come to water wars out here between Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and California, all vying. And it's already ugly, and it's just going to keep getting uglier. So, to be able to say to a farmer, if you plug this in, you could save 50% water. And if you apply for this grant or this write-off or exemption, you can sell someone else the other 50% that you didn't use. It's a fucking no-brainer. It's going to pay for itself within a couple of years, if not in the first year. So what the work you're doing is so important. It's not funny. And hopefully, like you said, you recharge your batteries, your spirit is healed now. All you need is a little push. So here we are. Push.
Appreciate it, man. And
we do actually have one question that did come up. Alex, will you be shipping home assistant ready sensors with the package?
Yeah, of course. The sensor is part of the package. The package, I was thinking, like, the base package is one pump unit, 8 plant units, or one pump unit with 1 8 plant unit would be a basic box.
Cool.
And it comes with the sensors, even the console for controlling the plants and everything. Yeah.
And then you can add up to how many more sensors to that one base unit?
So to that one pumping unit, you can add 7 more plant irrigation units, so for a total of 64 plants. And then you can add 4,000 of those to get a total of 304,000 plants in one whole system.
Sweet.
And they're not that expensive. They're not crazily priced.
No, the overall cost is around 60 to 100 US per plant, one-time investment. I'm going to try to keep it at that. That includes the cost of everything in the system.
Sweet.
The sensor itself, the sensor alone is $40 of that.
That was always the most expensive part.
Yeah.
Everything else you've been able to manage to figure out how to do it.
And that's really wholesale price. Sorry, the retail price of the sensor is around 50, 60 US. I can get it in the final product around 40, maybe a little bit less. So the whole system, including the pumps and everything, the whole system around $100 per plant. That's my target price. Maybe it's going to be a little bit less, a little bit more, but it's still peanuts compared to investing in meter, for example. 1 meter sensor is $1,500.
Or what about a dosatron? How much are those fucking things, right? And then you got to have the software updates. They're always clogging. You got to have the maintenance regimen.
Well, one thing I decided with my stuff is I wanted the hardware and the software to coexist without any issue. So the basic control unit is 100%. How do I say? It's not going to run your phone or whatever. It's going to be a dedicated console for this to avoid, obsolescence, to avoid virus, to avoid all kinds of other issues. I wanted the product to work as good as an Apple product and easy to use with a finger.
And you did it, dude. You did it. You absolutely.
I'm showing you the videos and whatever. I have some videos that, in fact, we can do some. If I set up my lab correctly, I can do some live demos here on the show.
All right.
And get comments also from. Are these comments available offline later?
Yeah.
I want to read them.
Yeah.
That's some pretty interesting commentary, huh?
Yeah. No, you can watch this over and you'll be able to see all the comments scrolling on the side.
Yeah.
Nice.
YouTube will propagate them. It can take up to 24 hours, but the chat will come up on YouTube.
Okay. Nice.
All right. So I guess let's go ahead and wrap it up. And Alex, when you get your lab all set back up again, we'll have you back on then, and then probably like close to the end of the year when you are hopefully ready to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Or anytime you guys want.
And I'm so glad you're back, dude. I missed having conversations with you because we used to geek out all the time. So welcome back to you, or welcome back to Canada, brother.
All right, thanks, man.
Yep.
Likewise, excited to retouch base with you guys, and hopefully we can do these talks live on the show too, so the people can.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure. Ken, I don't really have much to announce, but thank you, Alex, for today. Ken, thank you as always for all the behind-the-scenes work. Thanks to the chat for lively conversations in the background, and I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
Okay, for the rest of the week, guys, we have myself and Andy, of course, on Wednesday night. We're going to go back into what we're talking about last week. So you guys are going to want to check that out. Then, of course, on Friday, I'm interviewing the Hillbilly Chicken Ranch at around 1 p.m. Pacific. And then after that, Jane is going to be interviewing me on her channel. It's not going to be available on this channel, so you'll have to go to simply Jane Homestead to get the link, but I'll put it up in the social media, guys, so you guys can watch that on Friday. And who knows who we're going to have next week with Leighton, because I sent out a lot of emails to a lot of different doctors, so we're going to see who responds and see who we can get on for next week.
Yeah, and there's going to be some other exciting ones coming up soon when they're ready. Like, I'm not pushing people right now. I'd rather them to be really prepared because of some cool information. So
you bet. Okay, Alex, Leighton, if you guys want to stick around, I'm going to end the broadcast. Guys on chat, thank you very much for being here. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And if you can leave a comment and a thumbs up, even better. So we'll see you next week, guys.